The darkness pressing down on Henderson Field felt almost physical, thick as a blanket in the suffocating Solomon Islands heat. Private Robert Young Deere of the 164th Infantry Regiment held his M1 Garand rifle, running through the ritual one more time in his mind. His fingers knew every part by touch now. 11 days. That's all it had taken for his unit to arrive on this island and become the first army soldiers to take the offensive against the Japanese. Just 11 days since October 13th, and now his regiment held positions alongside the Marines, men still carrying those older bolt-action Springfield rifles. The soldiers of the 164th felt the weight of their semi-automatic weapons, each one loaded with 8 rounds in a clip, ready. The night pressed down heavier. Through the oppressive humidity and the endless screaming of insects came a sound that stopped every heartbeat. Thousands. That's what it sounded like. Thousands of Japanese troops surging forward through the vegetation, their voices rising to a fever pitch. Banzai, Totsugeki, the words cut through the darkness like blades. Among them, Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto of the 29th Infantry Regiment moved his platoon forward, his Type 38 Arisaka rifle feeling awkward and clumsy in his hands. The barrel stretched over 31 inches, and in this dense undergrowth, it caught on everything. The 5 rounds inside waited to be fed into the chamber, each one requiring him to work the bolt upward, back, forward, down. Behind him, some of the newer troops carried the Type 99 rifle, a more powerful weapon in a larger caliber, but still bolt action, still limited to 5 rounds before they'd need to reload with their stripper clips. What was about to unfold over the next 12 hours would reveal something fundamental about modern warfare. The Americans possessed a firepower advantage that the Japanese had never truly anticipated. The gap between the M1 Garand and the Arisaka rifles was more than just a technical difference. It was the difference between industrial innovation and military tradition. It was mass production pitted against craftsmanship. Between 1936 and 1945, American factories had churned out approximately 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles. Springfield Armory alone produced 3.5 million of them. Winchester added another 513,880. By January of 1944, Springfield was pushing out 1,000 rifles every single day. Winchester was hitting 600 daily at their peak. This wasn't just about numbers. When the U.S. Army officially adopted the Garand design on January 9, 1936, America became the first nation on Earth to issue a semi-automatic rifle as standard equipment to its infantry. The man behind this innovation was John Cantius Garand, a Canadian-American designer who'd spent 17 years at Springfield Armory perfecting his creation. The rifle fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, sending a 150-grain projectile downrange at 2,856 feet per second from its 24-inch barrel. The muzzle energy reached 2,656 foot-pounds. That was genuine stopping power. The brilliance of Garand's design lay in simplicity married to engineering. A small portion of the propellant gas got tapped from near the muzzle, pushing an operating rod that cycled the action automatically. Pull the trigger, 1 round fires. The gas pressure ejects the spent case and chambers the next round without any effort from the shooter. A trained soldier could fire between 40 and 50 accurate shots per minute. With a bolt-action rifle, you were looking at 15, maybe 20 rounds per minute if you were exceptional. The 8-round clip could be reloaded in under 3 seconds by someone who'd practiced. The whole system just worked, even when mud, sand, volcanic ash, or carbon, built up from continuous firing, got into the mechanisms. The Arisaka rifles carried a different legacy. Colonel Naria Kira Arisaka had designed the original Type 30 back in 1897, created to replace the older Murata rifles that Japanese forces had been using. By World War II, the Japanese military fielded 2 main variants: the Type 38, adopted way back in 1905, and the Type 99, introduced in 1939. The Type 38 fired a 6.5 by 50 mm semi-rimmed cartridge, sending a 139-grain bullet downrange at 2,500 feet per second, generating roughly 1,650 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The Type 99 used a beefier 7.7 by 58 mm round, firing a 182-grain bullet at 2,400 feet per second with 2,300 foot-pounds of energy. Both were bolt-action, both carried 5 rounds internally, loaded through 5-round stripper clips. The Type 38's extreme length of 50.3 inches made it one of the longest infantry rifles ever sent to war. That exceptional 31.4-inch barrel provided outstanding long-range accuracy, but in jungle combat, where engagements rarely stretched beyond 100 yards, it became a liability. Soldiers found themselves tangling with vines, struggling to bring the weapon onto targets through dense vegetation, nearly unable to use it effectively in bunkers or tight fortified positions. The Type 99 came in at a shorter 25.9 inches, more manageable in tight quarters, but arrived too late to fully replace the Type 38. The Arisaka action itself was remarkably robust. Post-war testing proved it stronger than the American Springfield, the British Lee Enfield, or the German Mauser actions. The safety mechanism could be operated silently, and engineers built in a gas escape system to protect the shooter if a cartridge case ruptured. But engineering excellence couldn't overcome the fundamental limitation of manual bolt operation in an age of escalating firepower. Japan produced roughly 3 million Type 38 rifles between 1905 and 1945 across multiple arsenals, including facilities at Koishikawa, which later became Tokyo Arsenal, Kakura, Nagoya, and Mokden in occupied Manchuria. Type 99 production from 1939 to 1945 reached approximately 3.5 million units, manufactured at 9 different arsenals, 2 of them outside Japan proper, at Mokden in Manchukuo and Jinsen in Korea. Over 6 million rifles total, yet Japan never achieved the production rates needed to fully modernize their infantry arms. Second-line troops, garrison forces, and naval infantry units still carried Type 38 rifles when the war ended, creating logistics nightmares with 2 different ammunition types in circulation. American M1 Garand production maintained remarkable consistency throughout the conflict. Springfield Armory's quality control rejected any rifle that failed to group within 5 inches at 100 yards. Parts had to be interchangeable between rifles from different manufacturers, enforced through strict specifications and precise gauging. A damaged Garand could be repaired in the field using parts salvaged from any other rifle, regardless of manufacturer. When heat treatment processes improved in 1942, receiver strength actually increased over pre-war production. The finish evolved for practicality rather than aesthetics. The switch from blue steel to Parkerizing improved corrosion resistance in tropical environments. Walnut stocks gave way to birch and other hardwoods due to walnut shortages, but functionality never suffered. Late war simplifications included stamped trigger guards replacing milled ones, but every single change underwent thorough testing to guarantee reliability. Japanese manufacturing quality, by contrast, deteriorated significantly as the war dragged on. Early Type 99 rifles featured genuine innovations. Chrome-lined barrels were actually the first military rifle to have them. Anti-aircraft sights with folding arms for leading aerial targets. Dust covers protecting the action. Integral wire monopods for stability. The finish gleamed deep blue, and stocks were crafted from quality Japanese hardwood with precise inletting. By 1944, production pressure and material shortages erased these refinements. Last-ditch rifles showed rough machining marks. Complex ladder sights got simplified to fixed rear sights. Wooden butt plates replaced metal ones. Wood quality deteriorated, fitting grew loose. Some final production rifles lacked even basic finishing. Tool marks visible across all metal surfaces. Chrome lining disappeared as chromium grew scarce. Monopods vanished. Even the imperial crescent chrysanthemum marking became crudely stamped rather than precisely rolled. The M1 Garand's semi-automatic action delivered tactical advantages far beyond simple rate of fire. After each shot, a soldier maintained his sight picture and cheek weld while the rifle cycled automatically. This meant faster target reacquisition and more accurate follow-up shots. The operating rod, driven by gas pressure tapped near the muzzle, cycled with enough force to function reliably even when fouled with mud, sand, volcanic ash, or carbon buildup from extended firing. The N-block clip system, sometimes criticized for its distinctive ping, when ejecting that allegedly alerted enemies the rifle was empty, actually provided the fastest reload of any contemporary military rifle. A trained soldier could reload in under 3 seconds, compared to 5 to 7 seconds for someone skilled at working stripper clips on a bolt-action weapon. That ping also gave immediate tactile and audible confirmation the rifle was empty, preventing confusion that occurred with rifles that didn't show an empty magazine. The M1's weight of 9.5 pounds, substantial by modern standards, helped manage the considerable recoil of the 30-06 cartridge, enabling rapid, accurate follow-up shots. At 43.6 inches long, it balanced well, with weight distributed between the heavy barrel and solid wood stock. The two-stage military trigger, while not match-grade, offered consistent performance that soldiers could master through training. The Arisaka rifles, despite their robust construction and theoretical accuracy, suffered inherent limitations of bolt-action operation that became critical in Pacific combat. After each shot, a soldier manually cycled the bolt through 4 distinct movements. Rotate the handle upward, pull it fully rearward to extract and eject the spent case. Push it forward to strip a fresh round and chamber it. Rotate the handle down to lock. This process broke firing position, disrupted sight alignment, and required 2 to 3 seconds even for well-trained personnel. The Type 38's extreme length made it particularly unsuitable for jungle warfare. Rifles caught on vines proved difficult to swing onto targets through dense vegetation, nearly impossible to use effectively in bunkers or fortified positions. The long barrel provided excellent long-range accuracy with minimal bullet drop, but when combat ranges rarely exceeded 100 yards and often occurred at conversational distances, it became a serious disadvantage. 5-round magazine capacity meant Japanese soldiers had to reload 60% more often than Americans to fire the same number of rounds. Loading via stripper clips required opening the bolt, positioning the clip correctly, pressing the rounds down into the magazine while withdrawing the clip, then closing the bolt. A process taking 5 to 7 seconds under ideal conditions and considerably longer under combat stress or in awkward firing positions. The 30-06 Springfield cartridge used by the M1 Garand was already standard throughout the entire U.S. military for the M19903 Springfield rifle, M1917 Browning machine gun, M1919 Browning machine gun, and Browning automatic rifle. This commonality simplified logistics enormously. A single ammunition type could supply rifles, automatic rifles, and machine guns. The rimless design fed reliably from clips, belts, and magazines. American ammunition production was staggering. Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone could produce 200 million rounds annually by 1943. Frankfurt Arsenal, Denver Ordnance Plant, and other facilities added hundreds of millions more. Quality control ensured consistent ballistics. M2 ball ammunition maintained velocity variation of less than 40 feet per second between lots. Japanese forces faced a far more complicated ammunition picture. Units equipped with Type 38 rifles required 6.5 by 50 mm semi-rimmed ammunition. Those with Type 99s needed 7.7 by 58 1mm rounds. The 6.5 mm round generated less recoil and let soldiers carry more ammunition, but proved inadequate against covered positions and lacked stopping power. The 7.7 mm round addressed these deficiencies but created a dual supply requirement. This two-caliber system created persistent logistics problems. Documented instances showed the 23rd Infantry Regiment on Guadalcanal receiving 7.7 meton ammunition for their Type 38 rifles, rendering both weapons and ammunition useless. Similar mix-ups occurred during the Philippines campaign and on isolated island garrisons. The semi-rimmed design of the 6.5 mm cartridge occasionally caused feeding problems in tropical conditions where ammunition became corroded. When the U.S. Army's 164th Infantry Regiment, a North Dakota National Guard unit, arrived at Guadalcanal on October 13, 1942, they brought something the Marines desperately wanted: M1 Garands. The Marines still carried primarily M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles, and they watched with a mixture of envy and skepticism as Army soldiers unloaded their semi-automatic weapons. During the climactic battle for Henderson Field on October 24 and 25, 1942, the advantages became undeniably clear. Staff Sergeant Mitchell Page, a Marine armed with a machine gun rather than a rifle, fought alongside soldiers of the 164th and witnessed their firepower firsthand. Private First Class James Cass of Company M, 164th Infantry, later recalled the moment. The Japs came at us in waves, barely visible in the darkness, except for the glint of their bayonets. With our Garands, we could put 8 rounds into them before they covered 30 yards. Each man was like a machine gun section. We'd fire, the rifle would cycle itself, and we'd fire again. No working a bolt, no breaking our sight picture. Just squeeze, boom, 8 times before reloading. The 164th Companies got fed into the line piecemeal as the Japanese attack developed, reinforcing Marine positions that were beginning to buckle. The devastating semi-automatic fire from the fresh Army troops helped stabilize the line. Colonel Bryant Moore, commanding the 164th, reported that his men expended over 250,000 rounds of 30 ASIO-6 ammunition in the 2-day battle. Japanese bodies stacked up in front of positions held by the 164th, many killed by the rapid, accurate fire of M1 Garands. Marine Private Robert Leckie, who would later write the memoir Helmet for My Pillow, observed the Army troops in action. We thought they were green, these dog faces with their newfangled rifles. But when the Japs charged, those Garands spoke with a voice we'd never heard before. It was like a continuous roar, not the sporadic crack-crack of our Springfields. Sergeant Masao Watanabe of the 29th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Division Sendai, survived the October offensive at Guadalcanal. In his post-war memoir discovered in Japanese military archives, he wrote, "We were told the Americans were soft, that our Yamato spirit would overcome their material advantages. Our officers assured us that 1 Japanese soldier was worth 10 Americans. But when we charged their lines that October night, it was like running into a wall of lead. Every single American rifleman carried a weapon that could fire automatically. Our Arisaka rifles worked exactly the way our grandfathers had operated them during the Russo-Japanese War decades before. They felt ancient in our hands. We would squeeze the trigger once, work the bolt mechanism while diving for cover, then fire a second round." By that time, the Americans had already unleashed 4 or 5 bullets in our direction. Watanabe recognized something troubling. Japanese battle strategies, perfected against Chinese opponents who carried outdated weapons or barely had ammunition to spare, became catastrophically ineffective against the relentless American barrage. The massed charges that had overwhelmed Chinese soldiers simply disintegrated when they collided with American rifle fire that seemed endless. We lacked the distance needed to close in with our bayonets. All our training about spiritual strength and hand-to-hand superiority meant nothing when American bullets cut us down 50 meters short of their positions. Lieutenant Hiroshi Takahashi, serving with the 230th Infantry Regiment, left behind a letter that captured this brutal reality. The American rifles fire with devastating speed. Every single soldier shoots as rapidly as our machine gun crews. When we launch an attack, it feels like we are charging straight into a fortress of machine guns. Our soldiers collapse before they can cycle their bolts for even a second shot. In December 1943, Marines from the 1st Marine Division landed at Cape Gloucester on New Britain, now equipped entirely with M1 Garands after their earlier battles on Guadalcanal. Rain poured down in sheets as Private First Class Eugene Sledge, who would later write, "With the old breed," observed the Garand's incredible durability in those miserable conditions. That Garand rifle was the most dependable weapon we carried. In downpours so thick they seemed like waterfalls, in mud so deep it grabbed your boots like quicksand, that rifle never quit firing. The Japanese with their bolt-action rifles simply couldn't match how fast we could shoot. When they tried establishing defensive positions in that thick jungle, we could concentrate so much fire into the trees that leaves came raining down like snow. Marine Sergeant John Basilone, later decorated with the Medal of Honor for his machine gun work on Guadalcanal, also carried an M1 Garand as his own weapon. He understood clearly that the Garand gave every Marine the striking power of 3 men equipped with bolt-action rifles. Fighting in jungle so dense, you might only catch a glimpse of an enemy soldier for a second. The ability to fire multiple shots without stopping to work a bolt made the difference between survival and death. During the Battle of Saipan in June 1944, what became the largest massed attack of the entire Pacific War unfolded when over 3,000 Japanese soldiers hurled themselves at American lines in a desperate assault on July 7th. Private First Class Harold Agerholm of the 4th Marine Division, gripping his M1 Garand, helped shatter that massive wave. Corporal John Miller remembered it clearly. The Japanese came at us shoulder to shoulder, howling like demons. Our Garands kept firing without pause. We pulled triggers as fast as we could move our fingers. The metallic ping of empty magazines being ejected sounded constant, like some macabre rhythm. The Japanese, with their bolt-action weapons, couldn't begin to match our volume of fire. They might get one shot off, possibly two if fortune favored them, before our semi-automatic fire dropped them. When the 1st Marine Division faced Japanese defenders at Palau in September 1944, those defenders had absorbed lessons from earlier defeats. Rather than suicidal charges, they had dug in behind fortified positions. Yet even defending from these prepared locations, their bolt-action Arisaka rifles proved inadequate. Marine Corporal R.V. Bergen watched this unfold. Whenever we spotted a Japanese position, we could pour fire into it from multiple angles. 4 or 5 of us with Garands could send 40 rounds toward a cave entrance in the time it took them to fire 5 or 6 shots back. We kept them pinned down while other Marines moved in with flamethrowers or explosives. American training for the M1 Garand centered on exploiting that semi-automatic advantage while keeping shots accurate. Training bases across America, Fort Benning, Camp Perry, Fort Ord, and many others, had soldiers spending weeks becoming expert with their weapons. The qualification process required hitting targets from 100 to 500 yards out, with the focus on rapid target acquisition and smooth trigger control. The Army's Field Manual 23-5 laid out the requirements clearly. Soldiers should fire 40 to 50 aimed shots every minute during actual combat. The instruction emphasized seeing your target correctly, keeping proper sight picture between each shot, since the semi-automatic operation meant you never had to reset your position. Riflemen practiced firing, watching where rounds hit, correcting their aim, and firing again quickly, taking full advantage of what that M1 could deliver. Training ammunition supplies were generous by any measure. New recruits fired at least 210 rounds for qualification, with additional shooting for advanced skills. Units heading into combat often spent thousands of rounds per person. All that live fire training created muscle memory and confidence that saved lives in actual fighting. The Marine Corps had initially questioned the M1 Garand, worried about using too much ammunition and whether constant practice might ruin accurate shooting, but eventually created training programs even more demanding than the Army's. Marine training pushed accurate rapid fire, not mindless spraying, but quick, well-aimed shots that took advantage of that semi-automatic action while maintaining the high marksmanship standards Marines had always demanded. Japanese training traditions came from samurai heritage, stressing precision shooting and mental discipline based on the principle of one shot, one kill, each bullet must count. This belief reflected both spiritual values about warrior focus and the practical reality that bolt-action rifles limited your options. Japanese infantrymen received extensive training at long distances, with the Type 38 rifle's remarkable accuracy at range treated as its main strength. The Imperial Japanese Army Training Guide explained, "The warrior's spirit must be the primary strength of the infantry. The rifle and bayonet are merely tools the warrior uses." This focus on spirit over actual firepower would prove disastrous when confronted with American weapons and ammunition abundance. Japanese soldiers trained constantly with bayonets, practicing movements daily like dancers perfecting choreography. The Type 38's exceptional length gave it theoretical advantages in bayonet combat, at least in theory, but Pacific fighting rarely gave Japanese soldiers the long-range engagements they had prepared for. Guadalcanal, New Guinea, and similar battlefields featured jungle so thick visibility sometimes meant only a few yards. Massed attacks that had worked against poorly equipped Chinese forces or colonial troops got torn apart by semi-automatic American rifle fire. The very sound of M1 Garands firing became a weapon in itself, demoralizing enemy soldiers. The rapid crackling of semi-automatic fire, mixed with that distinctive metallic ping of empty magazines popping out, had a crushing psychological effect on Japanese troops. A Japanese training document captured in 1943 tried preparing soldiers for this. American rifles create noise like many machine guns firing simultaneously. Do not let this volume discourage you. Remember, you possess spiritual strength and drive forward with courage. But spiritual strength meant nothing against superior firepower. A Japanese soldier named Yukio Nakamura, captured during fighting on Saipan, explained to his interrogators, "We had been told Americans were weaklings who depended on machines instead of warrior spirit. But their rifles that fired continuously, it felt like battling machinery, not actual men. Our commanders told us to charge with bayonets, but we were shot down long before we could reach close enough to use them." In sharp contrast, American soldiers developed tremendous confidence in their firepower. Marine Corporal James Russell recalled it this way: "Knowing you could send 8 rounds down range as quickly as your trigger finger could work, it made you feel almost unstoppable. When the Japanese charged at you, you did not panic. You just opened fire and kept firing until they stopped advancing, or you heard that ping, meaning you needed a fresh magazine." When examining squad-level combat, the M1 Garand's advantage became even more dramatic. An American rifle squad of 12 soldiers, equipped with 10 M1 Garands and 2 Browning automatic rifles, could deliver between 400 and 500 aimed rounds every minute during sustained engagement. A similar Japanese squad, using Arisaka rifles, could manage perhaps 150 to 180 rounds per minute, assuming those soldiers possessed excellent training and maximum bolt speed. This enormous difference changed how small units fought entirely. American squads could execute fire and maneuver tactics, with one team putting down suppressive fire while another advanced forward. The sheer volume of accurate semi-automatic fire kept enemy soldiers' heads down, letting American forces move closer and eliminate Japanese positions. Japanese squads, hampered by their bolt-action weapons, struggled to produce enough suppressive fire while keeping their soldiers mobile. When companies got involved, usually around 200 troops, the disparity became overwhelming. An American rifle company delivered tremendous defensive power against Japanese assaults. During the battle for Henderson Field on October 24th and 25th, soldiers from the 164th Infantry Regiment demonstrated this perfectly. Company G of the 164th Infantry fired 30,000 rounds of .30 caliber ammunition during a single night of combat, averaging roughly 150 rounds per soldier while taking only light losses. The mathematics were absolutely unavoidable. A Japanese battalion of 800 troops launching a massed charge encountered American companies firing 8,000 aimed rounds every minute. Even with darkness and confusion and fear factoring in, the semi-automatic fire created killing zones that human bravery simply could not penetrate. The M1 Garand's clear superiority directly enabled America's island-hopping strategy to work. American forces could land on Japanese-held islands, fully confident they could establish beachheads and hold them against counterattacks. The firepower from M1-equipped infantry meant smaller numbers of soldiers could control larger areas, enabling quick reinforcement for breakthrough operations. One island after another, Tarawa, Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Saipan, Guam, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the same pattern repeated itself. Japanese forces, unable to match American firepower, increasingly turned to desperate measures. Charges gave way to defensive fortifications, yet even in carefully prepared positions, the slow firing speed of bolt-action rifles meant Japanese soldiers rarely found chances to take advantage when Americans exposed themselves during attacks. Japan's decision to keep using bolt-action rifles originated significantly in their triumph during the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905. In that conflict, Japanese infantry armed with Type 30 and Type 35 Arisaka rifles had overpowered Russian soldiers through superior training, discipline, and clever tactics. The Battle of Mukden and the Siege of Port Arthur seemed to confirm that Japanese warrior culture and character could overcome material disadvantages. Yet this victory created a dangerous blindness to progress in weapons technology. The Japanese military leadership, dominated by officers who idolized the Russo-Japanese War as proof Japan had become a great power, missed that combat itself had transformed. World War I had shown everyone that firepower crushed traditional infantry tactics, but Japan, having played little role in that conflict, failed to accept these hard lessons. American military leaders took different lessons from World War I. General John J. Pershing, commanding American forces in France, had observed firsthand how automatic weapons dominated those battlefields. In 1918, he specifically insisted on creating a semi-automatic rifle, saying, "The soldier capable of delivering the most accurate fire in the least time will control tomorrow's battles." This directive started development efforts eventually resulting in the M1 Garand. America invested nearly 20 years refining the design, conducting rigorous testing, and constructing the factories needed for mass manufacturing. By the time 1936 arrived and the military adopted the M1, America possessed not merely a superior rifle, but an entire industrial system to produce, repair, and deliver millions of them. Japan did eventually understand the requirement for semi-automatic weapons. During the 1930s, Japanese designers began developing their own models, including the Type Ko rifle, created by Kijiro Nambu, and several gas-operated designs. However, these projects received minimal support, with military budgets prioritized for aircraft, battleships, and other weapons considered more important. Most significantly, when Japan finally tried reproducing the M1 Garand design as the Type 4 rifle, mistakenly called the Type 5 by many sources, Japanese factories could only produce enough parts for approximately 250 complete sets, with perhaps 100 to 125 actual rifles assembled before the war's conclusion. The Type 4, firing 7.7mm Japanese ammunition from a 10-round internal magazine loaded using two 5-round stripper clips, demonstrated that Japanese engineers grasped the M1's superiority, yet the nation lacked the manufacturing capability for large-scale production. The basic arithmetic of firepower demonstrated America's overwhelming edge. The M1 Garand firing standard ammunition released 2,656 foot-pounds of energy, leaving the muzzle. When a trained soldier fired 40 rounds each minute, this produced 106,244 foot-pounds of energy delivered per minute. A bolt-action Type 99 Arisaka, firing the 7.7mm cartridge with 2,300 foot-pounds per shot at a realistic firing speed of 15 rounds per minute, delivered only 34,500 foot-pounds per minute, less than one-third what the M1 generated. The 30 caliber round's trajectory, although it dropped more than the 6.5mm Arisaka at maximum range, performed better at typical Pacific War fighting distances. At 300 yards, already an unusual distance for jungle combat, the 30 caliber dropped 13.5 inches from the line of sight, while keeping 1,900 foot-pounds of energy, sufficient to smash through multiple layers of jungle plants and still wound or kill enemy fighters. The 6.5mm Arisaka, though dropping just 11 inches at the same distance, retained only 1,100 foot-pounds of energy, frequently lacking power to penetrate vegetation effectively. American ordnance specialists at Aberdeen Proving Ground conducted thorough testing in 1940, measuring the M1's real advantage. When soldiers used M1 Garands in controlled tests, they consistently achieved 24 aimed shots per minute at 200 yards with 90% accuracy. Soldiers with M1903 Springfields, essentially identical to Arisaka functioning, managed merely 10 shots with 85% accuracy. During rapid-fire tests simulating sudden enemy appearance, M1 shooters engaged 3 different targets in the time bolt-action shooters hit 1. Additional trials examined what happened during extended firing. Following 5 minutes of non-stop shooting, M1-equipped soldiers maintained 80% of their initial speed, while bolt-action shooters dropped to 60% because their arms fatigued from repeatedly working the bolt. The M1 semi-automatic action only needed finger motion, whereas bolt operation demanded big movements of the entire arm and shoulder. Combat records from Pacific engagements revealed clear patterns. On Guadalcanal, Army infantrymen with M1 Garands typically fired 150 to 200 rounds per person during days of intense fighting. Marines still carrying Springfield rifles used 60 to 80 rounds per person in comparable situations. This gap did not indicate ammunition being wasted, but rather showed the M1's superiority for engaging fleeting targets. Japanese soldiers rarely expended beyond 40 to 50 rounds per person daily, restricted by ammunition supplies and the physical demands of working a bolt repeatedly. Captured Japanese assessment documents repeatedly mentioned ammunition restrictions, but even with plenty of ammunition, bolt-action firing speeds prevented them from using more. Records seized throughout the Pacific Campaign demonstrated growing Japanese understanding of American firepower dominance. On that November evening in 1942, Lieutenant General Harukiichi Hyaku Takai surveyed the situation from his command post of the 17th Army positioned on Guadalcanal. What he observed deeply troubled him. The rifle fire coming from American positions possessed both density and accuracy that far exceeded anything Japanese planners had anticipated. Every single enemy soldier, it seemed, carried an automatic weapon that could pour devastating amounts of lead downrange. Even when Japanese forces achieved numerical superiority, they simply could not generate enough firepower to dominate the battlefield. Takai understood the mathematics of combat. His recommendation was blunt and born of harsh reality. Night operations and infiltration tactics offered the only viable approach to neutralizing American firepower advantages. By 1944, Japanese military thinking had fundamentally shifted. The doctrine could no longer ignore what eyes on the ground were reporting. American material superiority was simply undeniable. When Japanese commanders issued their battle orders to the defenders holding the Mariana Islands, the language reflected this bitter acknowledgement. American automatic rifles and machine guns created walls of fire during daylight hours that no infantryman could penetrate. All offensive operations must occur under darkness or when weather provided cover. Daytime movement across open ground equaled death, nothing more. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the strategist who would orchestrate the defense of Iwo Jima, grasped this reality with absolute clarity. Writing in January 1945, he documented his observations with clinical precision. Those American automatic rifles were extraordinary weapons. Single soldiers wielded the equivalent firepower of 3 or 4 Japanese riflemen combined. He would not squander his men's lives in senseless suicide charges against such overwhelming firepower. Instead, his soldiers would defend from fortified positions, forcing Americans to purchase every meter of ground at enormous cost. His strategy emphasized depth and persistence over futile frontal assaults. This approach extended the battle's duration considerably, yet even these carefully constructed defenses could not ultimately overcome American material dominance. Japanese military leadership attempted several approaches to address their infantry firepower deficit. The Type 100 submachine gun, fielded beginning in 1942, represented one such effort to provide automatic capability to their troops. Yet the production numbers told a discouraging story. By war's end, factories had manufactured approximately 27,000 units, a figure far too small to generate any strategic advantage. Beyond production shortfalls, the weapon itself possessed fundamental limitations. It fired the relatively weak 8mm non-bow pistol cartridge, a round lacking the effective range and stopping power required for the vast distances of Pacific warfare. Most revealing was what Japanese engineers attempted next. When American forces captured the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal in 1945, they uncovered evidence of an ambitious reverse engineering project. Japanese designers had systematically taken apart captured M1 Garand rifles, studying every component and mechanism. They then modified the design to accommodate Japanese 7.7mm ammunition and feed from a 10-round internal magazine loaded using standard 5-round stripper clips. In certain respects, Japanese engineers had actually improved upon the original design. They incorporated a rubber recoil pad for shooter comfort and added a last-round bolt-hold-open feature. These enhancements demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the weapon's potential. Yet Japanese industry proved incapable of translating this knowledge into mass production. Factories had completed parts sufficient for approximately 250 rifles. Of those, only 100 to 125 had been assembled into functioning weapons. The Type 4 rifle program revealed a sobering truth. Japanese military engineers fully comprehended the M1 Garands advantages. Their industrial infrastructure simply could not support manufacturing such complex weapons in meaningful quantities. Beyond purely technical and industrial constraints lay a deeper impediment. Japanese military culture resisted acknowledging material factors over spiritual and psychological ones. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, a staff officer who served across multiple theaters, wrote candidly after the war had ended. Everyone knew Americans possessed superior weapons. Admitting this openly would have destroyed soldier morale and faith in their mission. Command had to maintain the fiction of spiritual superiority, even as American automatic weapons cut down their soldiers by the thousands. This cultural resistance permeated every level of training and preparation. Even in 1944, Japanese infantry training manuals still emphasized bayonet practice and night infiltration techniques far more than marksmanship development. The official infantry manual allocated 3 pages to rifle accuracy, but devoted 12 pages to spiritual preparation and bayonet fighting techniques. This imbalance reflected fundamental beliefs about warfare that operational realities could not easily overturn. The Battle of Okinawa, stretching from April through June of 1945, provided the ultimate examination of American firepower confronting Japanese resolve. Fighting on Japan's very doorstep, 180,000 American troops faced 120,000 Japanese defenders in what would become the Pacific War's bloodiest engagement. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushigima commanded Japanese forces who had absorbed lessons from previous defeats. Rather than ordering wasteful suicide charges, they constructed elaborate defensive positions throughout Okinawa's rocky terrain. Even defensive strategies could not overcome the fundamental limitations of bolt-action rifles. As American forces advanced, Japanese defenders armed with Arisaka rifles struggled to generate sufficient volume of fire to halt the American assault. Private First Class Desmond Doss, the conscientious objector who would earn the Medal of Honor, later described the acoustic experience of American rifle support during his rescue efforts. The Garands sounded like one continuous roar, firing so rapidly they created an almost unbroken sound. He explained the tactical advantage plainly. Our boys could keep Japanese heads down while I went out for the wounded. If every one of them had bolt-action rifles like the Japanese, I never would have made it back with those men alive. On May 4, 1945, Japanese forces launched their only major counter-offensive of the battle. 5,000 soldiers attacked American lines in a coordinated assault intended to break through to American rear areas and disrupt supply lines. The attack commenced at 0430 hours, with the largest artillery barrage Japanese forces had managed anywhere in the Pacific War. 12,000 rounds delivered in just 30 minutes. As Japanese infantry emerged from their positions and charged across open ground, they encountered something they could not overcome. American rifle fire created a wall of lead. Private First Class Martin Brennan of the 17th Infantry Regiment recalled the assault's character. They came at us in waves, organized assaults backed by supporting fire, unlike the wild charges we'd encountered before. But our Garands never stopped. 8 shots, the distinctive ping of the clip ejecting, reload, 8 more shots. The noise was absolutely deafening. Japanese soldiers with their bolt actions would fire once, maybe twice, before our semi-automatic fire cut them down. The assault shattered against American firepower with catastrophic Japanese casualties. 4,000 dead lay on the battlefield against 714 American casualties. Thousands of M1 Garands, supported by automatic weapons and artillery, transformed those fields into killing zones where bravery could not overcome mathematics. Even when Japanese soldiers managed to close with American positions, the close-range firepower advantage of semi-automatic rifles proved absolutely decisive. Sergeant William Manchester, who would later become a celebrated historian, fought on Okinawa with the 29th Marines. He wrote about the M1 with something approaching reverence. The rifle was our best friend. In close combat chaos, the ability to fire 8 times without operating a bolt saved countless American lives. He described the contrast vividly. I watched Japanese soldiers trying to work their bolt actions with shaking hands, fumbling with the mechanism, while our boys simply kept pulling triggers. Planning for Operation Downfall, the anticipated invasion of Japan's home islands, scheduled to commence with Operation Olympic in November 1945, centered upon the M1 Garands role. Military planners studied Okinawa casualty figures and calculated what would be required to overcome expected Japanese resistance. They determined American forces would need massive firepower superiority. Production requirements called for 500,000 replacement M1 rifles for the operation alone. Springfield Armory and Winchester expanded production to a combined 2,000 rifles daily by August 1945. International Harvester was scheduled to begin production at an additional facility. The ammunition calculations proved staggering. Planners estimated needing 100 million rounds of .306 caliber monthly for infantry use alone, a figure that testified to the anticipated volume of fire. Intelligence assessments suggested the Japanese homeland defense would include 2.5 million Arisaka rifles distributed to military units, with millions more allocated to civilian militia organizations. However, many of these represented training rifles, obsolete models, or crude last-ditch single-shot weapons. The Type 99 substitute standard rifles being produced in 1945 were so poorly manufactured that American intelligence questioned whether they were even safe for the soldiers using them. American tactical doctrine anticipated that each invasion beach would first require suppression of Japanese defensive positions through naval gunfire and aerial bombardment. Following that preparation, assault troops armed with M1 Garands would advance and provide the volume of fire necessary to overcome defenders. Pacific battle analysis demonstrated that American forces equipped with semi-automatic rifles suffered 40% fewer casualties than projections for troops armed with bolt-action rifles in similar scenarios. Japanese planners, recognizing their firepower disadvantage absolutely, prepared to rely upon suicide tactics, human shields drawn from the civilian population, and close-quarters urban combat, where rifle advantages diminished. Secret Japanese plans discovered after the war revealed the desperation of their calculations. Bamboo spears distributed to civilians, suicide swimmers carrying explosive charges, and programs investigating biological weapons distribution. The Arisaka rifle, once pride of the Imperial Army, had been reduced to merely one component within a desperate defense. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended the war before Operation Downfall could commence. Post-war analysis suggested American casualties could have reached 500,000 to 1 million, with Japanese casualties likely measured in millions. The M1 Garand's firepower advantage would have been crucial in that invasion, though the human cost on both sides would have been catastrophic beyond measure. The M1 Garand's success influenced small arms development across the entire world. The Soviet Union, which had struggled with limited production of its SVT-40 semi-automatic rifle during World War II, developed the SKS carbine, taking direct inspiration from captured M1 Garands. China's Type 56 carbine was essentially a Soviet SKS derivative. France developed the MAS-49, incorporating lessons from both the American M1 and their own pre-war semi-automatic experiments. Britain, traditionally cautious in small arms adoption and satisfied with their Lee-Enfield rifles throughout the war, began immediate post-war development of semi-automatic designs. The Belgian FN-49, the Swiss Estigay 57, and the Italian BM-59 all reflected lessons absorbed from America's semi-automatic success during World War II. The M1 Garand continued serving through the Korean War, where it again demonstrated superiority over bolt-action rifles carried by Chinese and North Korean forces during that conflict's early stages. American M1-equipped forces and automatic weapons teams repeatedly halted massive Chinese human wave assaults, echoing the Banzai charges of the Pacific War. The rifle served until gradually replaced by the M14 during the late 1950s and early 1960s. In remarkable historical irony, the United States equipped the newly established Japanese self-defense forces with M1 Garand rifles during the 1950s. Japanese soldiers who had faced this weapon in combat now trained with it, experiencing firsthand the firepower advantages their predecessors had confronted. The JSDF received approximately 150,000 M1 Garands through American military assistance programs. Japanese veterans interviewed during the 1960s consistently identified American firepower, particularly the M1 Garand, as the decisive factor in their defeat. Saburo Sakai, Japan's most accomplished surviving fighter ace, stated plainly, "We could match American courage, we could match American tactics, we could never match American firepower." Every GI with his automatic rifle represented the combat value of 3 of our soldiers. Today, both the M1 Garand and Arisaka rifles occupy prized positions in collectors' hands, though for different reasons. The civilian marksmanship program has sold over 500,000 surplus M1 Garands to American citizens since its inception, making it perhaps the most common military collectible in existence. The rifle's distinctive ping when the clip ejects has become absolutely iconic in popular culture, featured throughout countless war films, television programs, and video games. General Patton's assessment of the M1 as the greatest battle implement ever devised remains unchallenged among World War II infantry weapons. Modern shooting competitions still feature M1 Garand matches, with the rifle demonstrating remarkable accuracy even by contemporary standards. Japanese Arisaka rifles, particularly those retaining intact imperial crescent markings, command premium prices among collectors. The crescent symbol representing the emperor was typically ground off before surrender, making examples with intact markings both rare and valuable. Modern testing has confirmed the Arisaka action to be exceptionally strong, actually stronger than the Mauser or Springfield actions, yet this mechanical superiority could not overcome the fundamental disadvantage inherent in bolt-action operation. Interestingly, both rifles have seen combat in the 21st century. M1 Garands have appeared in Middle Eastern conflicts, provided decades earlier through military assistance programs. Arisaka rifles have been documented in use by insurgent forces in Afghanistan and Myanmar, testament to the enduring durability of the design despite tactical obsolescence. On that October night at Henderson Field in 1942, Private Robert Young Deere of the 164th Infantry Regiment and thousands of American soldiers demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of semi-automatic rifle fire. They were proving a fundamental truth about modern warfare. Technological superiority combined with industrial production capacity could determine battle outcomes regardless of human courage or determination. The mathematics were inescapable. The M1 Garand delivered 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute versus the Arisaka's 15 to 20. 8 rounds before reloading compared to 5. Semi-automatic operation against manual bolt manipulation. Fire that could stop a banzai charge in its tracks against single shots, requiring sight picture to be re-established for each round. These mathematical realities multiplied across millions of individual firefights from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, helping determine the Pacific War's outcome. Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto, who led the charge on October 24, 1942, carrying his Type 38 Arisaka, did not survive to witness dawn. His rifle, with its exceptional accuracy and admirable construction, its smooth bolt action and robust receiver, could not overcome the wall of semi-automatic fire that met his attack. When found after the battle, his weapon held 3 rounds remaining in the magazine. He had managed to fire only twice, while advancing 100 yards under concentrated fire from M1 Garands. Around him lay dozens of his soldiers, most carrying full or nearly full magazines in their Arisaka rifles, cut down before they could effectively return fire. The confrontation between the M1 Garand and Arisaka rifles ultimately illustrates a larger truth about the Pacific War. Courage and determination, while admirable and necessary, could not overcome the arithmetic of firepower. The United States had produced 5.4 million M1 Garands by war's end, ensuring virtually every American rifleman possessed semi-automatic capability. Japan, despite manufacturing over 6.5 million rifles total, never escaped the technological constraints of bolt-action operation. The nation could never match the volume of aimed fire that semi-automatic rifles produced. General Patton's assessment was not hyperbole but mathematical fact. From the steaming jungles of Guadalcanal, where the rifle first proved its worth in American hands, to the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, where Marines used it to break Japanese strongpoints, from the monsoon-soaked horror of Cape Gloucester to the desperate urban combat anticipated for the Japanese homeland itself, the M1 Garand proved itself more than merely a rifle. It was a war-winning weapon, providing American forces a decisive edge in the world's most brutal theater during history's most terrible war. The distinctive ping of an ejecting clip became the sound of American victory across the Pacific. That sound meant 8 enemy soldiers would never reach American lines. It meant another Japanese position had been suppressed. It meant another island secured, another step taken toward Tokyo Bay. Against it, the bolt-action Arisaka, for all its genuine virtues of strength and accuracy, was simply fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's technology. In final analysis, the Pacific War was won through cumulative effects of American industrial might and technological superiority rather than any single weapon or battle. The M1 Garand stood as perhaps the most visible symbol of this advantage at the individual soldier level. Every GI and Marine carrying an M1 possessed the firepower equivalent of 3 enemy soldiers, an advantage no amount of spiritual training or warrior tradition could overcome. The Japanese soldier, brave as he was, dedicated as he was, skilled as he was, could operate his rifle bolt only so rapidly. In modern warfare, rate of fire multiplied by accuracy equaled survival. The Arisaka rifles now rest in museums and private collections, respected for their quality and historical significance. The M1 Garand likewise has passed into history, though many still function perfectly on rifle ranges across America. But in their time, in the desperate struggle spreading across the Pacific, one was unmistakably superior to the other. The semi-automatic rifle had transformed every American soldier into a base of fire unto himself. That advantage, multiplied across the vast expanse of the Pacific theater, helped ensure Allied victory. The final word belonged not to courage or spirit, but to the mechanical precision of gas-operated semi-automatic fire. 8 rounds, 1 trigger pull each, before that distinctive ping announced it was time to reload and continue the fight.